Greetings. Hello, and welcome to The Current, the North Central Region Water Network Speed Networking webinar series. My name is Eugene Bragg, and I will be moderator for today's session. Currently, I serve as the chair of the North Central Region Water Network representing Ohio. I'm also program director for Aquatic Ecosystems Extension in the state of Ohio. For those who don't know us, the network is a 12-state extension-led network working to advance stewardship of equitable access to clean and abundant water by facilitating interdisciplinary collaboration, by leveraging and sharing resources across land grant institutions within the North Central region. Today, we'll be discussing aquatic invasive species. This topic weighs on many of our minds, especially at this time of year when we're getting calls from folks using our lakes and rivers for boating and other recreation. Coincidentally, or perhaps by design, I also chair a committee that advises the state of Ohio on issues related to aquatic invasive species. A couple housekeeping items. We're using Zoom webinar today. If you're having audio issues, you can connect via your phone as well as your computer. If you need to connect by phone, just click the up arrow on the mute icon and select the switch to phone audio option. We'll be using the question and answer panel for our speakers today, and there will be dedicated time for question and answers after all three presentations. The Q&A panel can be found at the bottom of your screen in the Zoom control panel, of course. Also, be sure to read through the other questions that other attendees have submitted because you should upvote those questions that are similar to the question that you'd like to ask if that question's already been posted, because we're going to prioritize those questions that have received the most upvotes that most demand an answer. There's also a chat feature for Zoom, which Anne from the North Central Region Water Network will be monitoring behind the scenes today. Please use chat if you have technical difficulties or questions about the North Central Region Water Network and the current webinar series in general. Please do not use chat for questions for our speakers. Be certain that any questions you have for our speakers are posted to the Q&A panel. All right, so let's get started. We have three great speakers today. We'll have Greg Conover from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We'll have Teresa Gruninger from the Great Lakes Commission, and Stuart Carlton, who is the Assistant Director of Illinois-Indiana Sea Grant. To begin, Greg Conover is a biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. He coordinates MICRA, which stands for the Mississippi Interstate Cooperative Research Association. I know Greg best through my work with the Mississippi River Basin Panel, which is one of the regional advisories to the National Aquatic Nuisance Species Task Force. I am a recent past co-chair of the Mississippi River Basin Panel. You can see the rest of Greg's fine biography there on your screen. Give a quick look, and then I'm going to stop sharing so Greg can share. If you're ready to fly, Greg, are you ready?
I am. Thank you. All right. Let me get my screen shared. Okay. Are you seeing my presentation?
I am. Looks good.
Great. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you for the introduction, and also good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in the webinar today and provide some information on the Mississippi River Basin Panel on Aquatic Invasive Species. As the first speaker in the series today, I don't want to assume that everyone on the webinar is already familiar with aquatic invasive species. So I want to start by first providing just a quick explanation of aquatic invasive species and their significance. So aquatic invasive species are non-indigenous species, that is, they're non-native species that threaten the diversity or abundance of native species, the ecological stability of waters where they become introduced or established, and they may threaten commercial, agricultural, aquacultural, or recreational activities dependent on these waters. Unchecked, aquatic invasive species have the potential to imperil public health and transform ecosystems, resulting in widespread environmental degradation. AIS also threatens sectors of the nation's economy that depend upon natural resources and native ecosystems. Aquaculture, tourism, recreation, shipping, and water resources infrastructure, including hydropower facilities, are all examples of industries that may be adversely impacted by aquatic invasive species. Most aquatic invasive species introductions cannot be eradicated once they become established, resulting in the invasion itself becoming irreversible. For these reasons, proactive and coordinated management is necessary to protect the waters of the United States from aquatic invasive species. And it's also for these reasons that an aquatic nuisance species task force was established by Congress with the passage of the Non-Indigenous Aquatic Nuisance Prevention and Control Act in 1990 and was reauthorized with the passage of the National Invasive Species Act in 1996. I'll refer to this legislation as the Act throughout my presentation. Also, as I transition to talking about the Aquatic Nuisance Species Task Force, I want to note that the term aquatic nuisance species, or ANS, is often used interchangeably with aquatic invasive species, AIS, which has become the preferred term of federal and state managers. The Act charges the ANS Task Force with the responsibility of developing and implementing a program for waters of the United States to prevent the introduction and dispersal of AIS, to monitor, control, and study such species, and to disseminate related information. As you can see on your screen, the ANS Task Force is composed of 13 federal agencies and 13 ex officio members. And it is co-chaired by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The Act also authorized the formation of the Great Lakes Regional Panel, the Western Regional Panel, and other regional panels as needed to assist and advise the ANS Task Force. The total of 6 regional panels have been established under the Act to provide national coverage and are shown on the slide. The Mississippi River Basin Panel on Aquatic Invasive Species, which I'll refer to as is one of the 6 regional panels. Members within each of the 6 regional panels include representatives of state and federal agencies, tribes, non-governmental organizations, and commercial interests. Now, while the Aquatic Nuisance Species Task Force has a national focus, the regional panels are a critical mechanism for fostering collaboration to address regional AIS threats and ongoing invasions, and for achieving the goals of the Aquatic Nuisance Species Task Force. The roles of the regional panels, as defined in the Act, include identifying regional priorities, making recommendations to the Aquatic Nuisance Species Task Force, coordinating regional aquatic nuisance species activities in the region, providing advice pertinent to regional aquatic nuisance species issues, and reporting annually to the Aquatic Nuisance Species Task Force. To fulfill these roles, the Act in 1990 authorized $300,000 annually to fund regional panel activities. That funding level, which is now shared by 6 regional panels and has not increased since 1990, now provides $50,000 annually to support the activities of each regional panel. So that doesn't provide a lot of ability to implement projects to address such a large issue and complex issue. However, the MRBP has become very good at leveraging this funding to initiate and support projects that address the panel's priorities. Now, the members of the ANS Task Force work in conjunction with these 6 regional panels and also issue specific committees to coordinate efforts among agencies, as well as efforts of the private sector and other North American interests to prevent and manage AIS in waters of the United States. This is accomplished through the development and implementation of the ANS Task Force's strategic plan. The strategic plan includes 6 goals shown on the slide here, each with a targeted set of objectives and associated strategies. These national level goals are reflected within the priorities and focus areas of the MRBP and other regional panels. Now, the MRBP was established in 2003 and is hosted by the Mississippi Interstate Cooperative Resource Association. MICRA is an interstate partnership of 28 state Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, organized in 1990 to provide a basin-wide coordination mechanism to improve management of interjurisdictional fish and other aquatic resources in the basin. Federal agencies that manage and regulate Mississippi River Basin resources also participate in the MICRA partnership. The MICRA partnership is not presently or recognized by Congress under any formal statute, holds no regulatory authority, but the partnership does participate as an ex officio member of the ANS Task Force. And as the host organization for the MRBP, MICRA serves as the fiscal agent for the panel and provides support for daily operations. In turn, the MRBP works with MICRA and the MICRA Aquatic and Invasive Species Committee to identify and address priority AIS issues in the Mississippi River Basin. Through the MRBP, members have the ability to coordinate and advise on national and regional level AIS priorities and programs, collaborate on the prioritization, planning, and implementation of on-the-ground projects and research, and to inform AIS policy at regional and national scales. The MRBP is composed of members, technical committees, and an executive committee. The MRBP membership consists of both voting and non-voting members. There are 53 voting membership positions in the MRBP. This is a large group due to the size of the basin, which includes 31 states and 2 provinces, and due to the congressional direction for the regional panel to have broad stakeholder involvement. As you can see on the slide, 26 of the basin states participate in the MRBP as voting members, as well as the Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada. Now, the MRBP has struggled at times to maintain active participation from representatives in each of the categories of interest that are identified in the Act and listed as headings there on the slide, particularly from tribal authorities, local municipalities or community groups, private user groups, and private commercial representatives. While representatives from these groups have participated with the panel at different times over the years to address a specific issue of interest, the panel often lacks consistent representation from one or more of these groups. The MRBP continually looks for opportunities to raise awareness about the regional panels, network with stakeholder groups, and encourage participation in the panel for improved regional coordination. To be clear, any stakeholder, not just those identified as categories of interest in the Act or on the slide, can participate as non-voting members. The MRBP welcomes the engagement of all stakeholders interested in coordinating on AIS in the Mississippi River Basin. In-person meetings of the MRBP membership are held approximately every 9 months to foster coordination and to address the responsibilities set forth for the regional panels. MRBP meetings are open to the public and are announced on the panel's website and in the Federal Register. If you are interested in regional coordination on AIS-related issues, an individual issue or AIS in general, I encourage you to learn more about the MRBP or another regional panel in your area of geographic responsibility and to consider attending a meeting. The regional panel's effectiveness are maximized through broad stakeholder participation and the engagement in regional coordination. So the MRBP collaborates on the development and implementation of the annual work plans for the panel. Much of the panel's work is accomplished by technical committees. In fact, I consider the technical committees to be the engine of the panel. MRBP members, both voting and non-voting, participate in the committee discussions, identify priorities, develop and implement committee work plans to address highest priority needs, and develop proposed recommendations for the ANS Task Force to advise on regional AIS issues and federal programs in the region. Technical committee discussions frequently inform topics, presentations, and focus sessions for future MRBP coordination meetings. The MRBP has 3 standing technical committees that align with and address many of the goals in the ANS Task Force's strategic plan. The Education and Outreach Committee assesses and develops methods, tools, and messaging that effectively communicate AIS issues in the Mississippi River Basin. Information sharing needs are assessed for public education, as well as for within the MRBP membership, and may range from basic AIS biology to applied management methods. The Prevention and Control Committee assesses and develops effective strategies and tools for preventing the introduction and spread of AIS, as well as to control and manage existing populations within the basin. This committee is mainly targeted at resource managers, but it relies heavily upon the expertise of a wide range of interests, including private interest, to ensure that prevention and control strategies are acceptable and feasible. And the Research and Risk Assessment Committee is charged with identifying and addressing knowledge gaps about current and potential AIS in the basin. The Research and Risk Assessment Committee's priorities are largely identified as needs to support the other two technical committees or issues identified by the panel as a whole. Okay, and then lastly here, last couple minutes, I want to quickly provide just a few examples of the work the MRBP has completed or supported the completion of to address AIS priorities in the MRBP. So to guide the work of the MRBP, the micro-member state agencies identified a list of most troublesome AIS in the Mississippi River Basin. The states identified 46 species, including 18 plants, 15 fish, several mollusks, crustaceans, and microorganisms, and 1 mammal. The MRBP members are currently working on an updated list to prioritize the AIS of greatest concern to the panel. The MRBP has developed an Incident Command System, or ICS-based model rapid response plan to assist state natural resource management agencies effectively plan and quickly implement rapid response actions. The model plan includes a template that can be used by states in developing their own rapid response plans. An addendum of rapid response protocols for aquatic invasive fish was developed to accompany the model rapid response plan. And the panel has also held a rapid response mock exercise to give AIS managers the opportunity to practice an ICS-based rapid response. The MRBP has organized or sponsored numerous symposia to foster communication and improve coordination of management and control of priority AIS, including invasive carps and snakeheads, as well as to advance research on eradication and control tools, such as genetic biocontrol of invasive fish. Oh, let's see here. The panel has also funded research funded research projects to identify effective protocols for preventing the spread of zebra mussel veligers and non-indigenous crayfish by warm water fish production hatcheries. And the MRBP has recommended priority species and supported the development of eDNA markers for early detection monitoring and supported research for the development of a snakehead eDNA field test. And I see Eugene, so I'm going to click along very quickly here. Let's see. So I don't have time to really provide any examples of these priorities, but again, just trying to give you some examples of the actions by the MRBP to address the AI issues that have been identified as priorities through the regional coordination that occurs through the MRBP. The panel also regularly develops and provides recommendations to the ANS task force regarding policy gaps and actions to address priority coordination, prevention, management and control, research, and outreach needs. They get a lot accomplished. So this is a very high-level overview of the Mississippi River Basin panel on aquatic invasive species, and I encourage you to visit the MRBP's website here on the slide to learn more about the regional panel, and you may also contact me directly if you have any specific questions. So thank you again for the opportunity and for your time this afternoon.
Thanks so much, Greg. And if you want to ask Greg questions about regional collaborations like this, please do enter your questions in the Q&A session. Personally, I have found my own community service via engagement with the panel to be very enriching. So I wholeheartedly encourage you to do similarly.
Thank you.
Certainly. Moving on, I'd like to introduce Teresa Gruninger, who works for the Great Lakes Commission since 2021. Again, you can find her excellent biography listed here on your very screens. And I know that Teresa will today be talking about a concept called the Invasive Species Landing Blitz. So I'm going to stop my share so that you can begin yours, Teresa, and take it away, please.
All right. Let's see. Does that look good from your guys' end?
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hi all. I'm Teresa. I am an AIS project manager at the Great Lakes Commission. And I'm going to be talking to you guys about one of the projects that the commission helps administer, which is the Great Lakes Aquatic Invasive Species Landing Blitz. And thanks to Greg, we already got a good overview about aquatic invasive species and why there's such a concern with them. So thank you, because I get to just dive right in. Um, Always, what button will make it go forward? There we go. Okay. So I really couldn't focus too much on like a problem slide since it's such a short overview talk. But of course, preventing the spread of aquatic invasive species, or like the acronym AIS, which I will call them, is and very, especially through the recreational boating pathway, is a priority for many jurisdictions. Specifically in the Great Lakes, but also in other regions too. Of course, it is a national problem. It's not just a Great Lakes problem. So with any good problem, we want to know, how can we bring more awareness to it? How can we get the folks on the ground to know about this problem? So the Great Lakes AIS Landing Blitz is just one way states and provinces in the Great Lakes have been bringing awareness to the potential spread of invasive species through the recreational boating pathway. And so this event takes place over a 2-week period, generally like the end of June, early July time, which coincides with the 4th of July here in our states, and Canada Day in the provinces, which are really big boating holidays. So people are on the ground boating. And then all participating agencies deliver consistent messaging about preventing AIS introduction and movement through boats and equipment. And some of the events are done locally, so maybe like a local SISMA or a local conservation district is putting on events, but they're also done statewide. So like the DNR and stuff is holding events. So it's really well coordinated. And then just a really brief overview of like what the goals of this kind of 2-week event is. We want to focus on AIS prevention, but also containment. So of course, many lakes here inland, and of course our Great Lakes, have invasive species already in them. And it is what it is, but we want to make sure those lakes that don't have those species, aren't those hitchhikers, like aren't, moving from one place to another. So containment's really important. We want to make sure boaters are aware, like, do they know what invasive species are? Are they aware what is in the lake that they're boating at? And do they know responsible boating behavior? So do they know the clean, drain, dry steps? Are they aware that you need to like decontaminate fishing gear and stuff like that? And then of course, the strengthen partnerships. So, a lot of organizations this is a good time to get out in front of the public and, give a little spiel of what they're about. So prior to 2019, this landing blitz was still a thing, but it was held individually within our Great Lakes states. So for example, New York might have been hosting their events at one time of the year, and they had their own individual advertising, their own individual like social media campaign than like what Michigan may have done. But in 2019, under the leadership of Michigan Eagle and the Great Lakes Commission, we held our first regionally coordinated landing blitz event. And so here's just a map of all of our 2024 events that have been held in the Great Lakes. So you can see this is an amazingly well-coordinated regional effort. We have events in every single Great Lakes state, and then our province of Ontario as well. And then we also have been expanding to like the Lake Champlain Basin too, and like Vermont, they have been doing stuff as well with the landing blitz, which is great. I encourage you to go to our website, which is www.glc.org/blitz, for more information about what our regional partners are doing year to year. And you can find this map on there as well, and you can interact and like see where events are being held. So since the start of the regional coordination, I just wanted to highlight all of the great effort that goes into putting on these events, because it's a lot. So these numbers here do not even include our 2024 season, because we're still, wrapping those numbers up. So just in the past 5 years, our regional partners have educated more than 705,000 people at boat launches. We encourage partners to post on social media, such as Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, about the events. And we've generated about like 1 million social media impressions. And then some of our states as well do watercraft inspections. Some states don't, some states do, but we've had about of 560,000 water cap inspections during those 2 weeks events. So like super successful, so much on the ground effort happening. But in 2021, we wanted to think about how we could enhance our Landing Blitz events even further. So we have such good stuff happening, but can we bring it to a new audience? So in 2021, the Great Lakes Commission was awarded 2 years of Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, and we got another 2 years of funding this past year to kind of focus on these large efforts of improving capacity for boat inspections and outreach, expanding outreach through mass and social media, and developing tools to help recruit and retain local partners. So that was really exciting. Of course, more money allows us to do more things. So with improving capacity for boat inspections and in-person outreach, we tackled this objective by the distribution of small grants through those who are in the Great Lakes Basin. And by small grants, we mean less than $10,000. So really not a ton of money, but it has been incredibly impressive to see what people can do with like a $10,000 or less grant. So we've had this program now start in 2022, 2023, and this is our third year in 2024, and we will have 2025 funding as well. So if this perks your interest, this is something that will be happening for the next summer season as well. We've had grant recipients from 18 separate organizations in the Great Lakes region. That includes 7 of our Great Lakes states and 1 Indigenous nation. We've awarded about $184,000 worth of funds to our grant recipients to host these Landing Blitz events. And they're super efficient. They've held, and this is not including our 2024 year. So just in the past 2 years, they've held 265 events across the Great Lakes Basin. And they've talked to about 20,000 individual people about aquatic invasive species and watercraft. And so here's just a little map. If you want to find out more about our grant recipients, like who our grant recipients were and where they were hosting events, take a look on our website. We have this cool map here. Our 2024 recipients are not on there yet. We'll add them soon once they finish the season. But it's really cool. You get to see who they are and like what they've been doing. So, and then our second kind of objective of helping recruit and retain local event partners, how to get people more information about starting a Landing Blitz program. So we had this idea of our grant recipients are so knowledgeable. They've done this now for multiple years. So we made them interview with us and tell us all the juicy information about what it takes and where they struggled and what they wish would have done sooner. And like, how hard is it to get a permit to have an event at a boat launch and all those things you don't think about until you start doing. So they gave us like just the most amazing amount of valuable information. And so we kind of put these in foundational documents. So we have like a little document for if you're the first time ever hosting a Landing Blitz event, like here's all the things you might want to think about beforehand. We have a whole separate document about if you want to expand your event, like how can you work with local partners and enhance your program. And then as well as this timeline planner, which has been super helpful because a lot of this planning has to happen way earlier than you think it does, especially like if you need to get like a permit to be at a launch or something like that. And then another thing we had requests for people was just to have an online training. So this training is hosted through the Moodle platform. It's available all year round. And it just talks, people can work through it and it just shows like what you might want to be doing at an event. Specifically, if there's volunteers who don't really know about aquatic invasive species, they can work through the training so they're comfortable having conversations with boaters. And then very lastly, I'm sorry, it's 10 minutes, I have to go quickly. I want to talk about our effort to expand outreach through mass and social media. And we decided to really tack on this idea of using digital marketing, which is a little bit new to invasive species outreach. And we wanted to see what that looked like. So in 2023 and 2024, we've been using a platform called Ground Truth. And Ground Truth is a self-service marketing platform. So you're not working with an agency, you're kind of doing it all yourself. But we've been using this platform to promote the Landing Blitz events on a digital marketing level. Like I said, this was completely new to us. None of us on our team are digital marketers. So we had a lot to learn, but we've been really surprised with like the success rate we've been able to get with it for like not a huge budget. So in 2023, we just had a 15-second video that was created by Wisconsin Sea Grant, just like a cute little short video about the Landy Blitz. 2024, we used that same video, but we also made like terrific banner ads, which like here's one on the screen, that if you clicked on it would take us to like our website. So for those 2 years, we only had a $15,000 campaign budget, which in the digital marketing world is really small. But total for those 2 years, we were able to generate almost like 3 million different impressions. So that's pretty high. And so here's just an example of like what our online dashboard looks like. And I only bring this up to emphasize that each state gets its own individualized campaign. And so that way, state population is not putting into like what states get more money. Every state, got an individual campaign for about $2,000. And we make those locations of where they're getting advertised, like the states get to pick and prioritize what areas they want to focus on for digital marketing. And then we kind of went about targeting an audience in two different ways. So the first way is creating a geofence. And a geofence audience is created when you create a little boundary around a location you're interested, such as like a lake or a marina or harbor. And when someone walks into that boundary and has their cell phone open, you get an ad. And I'm sure you guys have all experienced that when you go somewhere new and you're getting specialized ads. That's exactly what it is. So they were getting our Landing Blitz ad. And then we also use something called CTV retargeting, which stands for Connected TV Audience. And so that kind of looks like when someone enters our geofence and they get their ad on the phone and they're like, okay, they get our banner ad and then they leave the geofence and let's say they go home. So they could even like leave the state. They could like go back home to Kentucky or something. And then they're watching something on a streaming TV device. So like Hulu or something like that that has ads, and then they would get our ad again in video format. So that's kind of the areas that we focused on. We were able to accomplish quite a bit with a small budget. And then lastly, I just wanted to highlight, like, here's our map. So we don't have our 2024 on-site marketing data summarized yet. It just ended like last week. But here's our 2023 on-site marketing data. And so each color represents a different geofence that our state reps helped pick and prioritize. And the size of the bubbles impressions. So you can see there's different areas that had a lot more impressions than others, but overall each state is receiving an equal and well-organized campaign, and it's focusing on the areas that they have concerns about, which is great. And I talked really fast, but I think that might have been 10 minutes. So thank you. My email is on the screen, so please reach out to me if you have questions that you don't get to like want more info on any of the stuff, but also go to our event website because we have a ton of stuff on there as well. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Teresa. And fear not, your email will be again shared at the end
Yes.
of the presentation. So
All right.
again, thank you for an excellent presentation.
Yep. Stop sharing.
So finally, I'd like to introduce Dr. Stuart Carlton, the Assistant Director of the Illinois-Indiana Sea Grant Program. At Purdue, he produces a couple of podcasts, Teach Me About the Great Lakes and Ask Dr. Fish. And because by training I'm a fisheries biologist, I'm quite intrigued by the second title. Whatever, you can see his accomplished biography on your screen, of course. Dr. Carlton, are you ready to take it away?
I am ready to roll. Thank you, Eugene. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the free advertising too. Hi, everybody. My name is Stuart Carlton. I'm with Illinois Indiana Sea Grant. And I realized I did my name tag, so I'm supposed to I have my hat on so that you can see the program that I work for. I like to get to know who it is that I'm talking to. So really briefly, if you could put in the chat, not the Q&A, or you'll totally hose the Q&A. In the chat, if you could put on like a 1 to 5 scale how familiar you are with the steps that boaters should take to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species kind of in the Great Lakes. So 5 means you're very familiar, 1 means you're not at all familiar. And let's see, I'm seeing lots of 4s and 5s. Oh, good. I figured y'all would be pros. And you are. There's a 1. Sorry, 1, you're getting outvoted by everybody else who's more familiar. But the short version is that boaters in the Great Lakes states and in other places too are a real a real problem when it comes to the spread of invasive species. And the main reason is that when they move their boats or their fishing equipment or whatever from one lake to another, one river to another, one water body to another, it can cause the species to spread. And so what they've done is developed a lot of different behaviors that you should do or steps you should take. And those steps are all fall under the vague rubric, I think that Teresa mentioned it, called clean, drain, dry. So anyway, so what that's germane to what I'm about to talk about. Now I'm going to successfully share my screen using the share your screen function, which I believe I have done. Awesome. Still here though. All right, great. So this is a study that we did. We're calling Clean Drain Y, which is aquatic invasive species prevention behavior among Great Lakes boaters. And as always, we have to start with acknowledgments. There's a lot of co-authors on this paper, and there are a lot of funders on this project. And so thank you to the co-authors and the funders. It's important to thank them. So all this began with hot dogs and TV commercials, which is where most of my ideas begin. And of course, Tim Campbell. For those of you who work in the Great Lakes, you might know Tim. For those of you who don't, you might not. He's a aquatic invasive species specialist with Wisconsin Sea Grant, and he does a lot of coordination work now too. And Tim and I sit around and we talk about a few things. One thing we talk about is the most disgusting food you can find in a ballpark. And so Tim was in Cleveland, I believe, or Cincinnati, and found whatever that is, which looks like it's got bacon and Fruit Loops and mac and cheese. And yeah, I see the horrified reactions. I agree. Tim said it was, quote, better than you would think. I'm not sure I agree with that, but we talk about that. And the other thing we talk about a lot is invasive species outreach. And one thing we like to talk about, does any of this work, right? We invest so much money, so much time, so much bandwidth into all these, we got campaigns, the great work that Teresa's doing. We have these clean, drain, dry stations and things like that. And so does any of this work is a question that I think is fair to ask because it's a big investment, right? And that got me thinking about advertising, right? We like to talk about I think about advertising some, and when you think about, here's just Coca-Cola's advertisements. You see all these different formats that they have. They got billboards, they got magazines, they got TV. I sort of made myself transparent so you could see the Diet Coke shirtless guy. If you're my age, you remember him. If you're a little older than me, you remember Willie Green. And so that's a question that comes up in advertisement a lot. Not Willie Green. Mean Joe Green. I apologize. Anyway, does any of this work? And sort of the saying in advertising is, yes, half of it works, but we don't know which half. And we know that half of it doesn't, but we don't know which half. And so we have to keep doing all that stuff. So we thought we would look at that in the context of aquatic invasive species. And so I'm a social scientist by trade, which is why I'm in charge of the Coastal and Great Lakes Social Scientist Lab, because otherwise that would be a problem. And so what we're doing is just we decided that we would survey boaters, and we're going to survey boaters across many of the Great Lakes states. And we had two different methods for reasons that aren't worth getting into now. But the states here in purple, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan, we did a Qualtrics online panel. Now, this is not a survey that we sent out to people over email. We tried to get a random selection of people to the extent that we could. And that's just an internet survey, though. And then we were able to do a mail-based survey in Ohio and Pennsylvania. So these are 5 different states that we surveyed. And what we want to do is find out, are people doing the behaviors? And if so, what is causing them to do the behaviors, right? The clean, drain, dry behaviors that we're spending so much time discussing. And to do that, we use a theory called the theory of planned behavior, which I'm not going to go into detail on because I don't have time. But I will put it up here so that you can take a peek at it. So basically what this model says is we're looking at the behavior, or we're actually asking people about their behaviors or their intention to perform the behavior in the future. And according to the theory of planned behavior, your desire or your intention to perform a behavior is influenced by things like your attitude towards the behavior. Is this something you have a favorable or unfavorable attitude towards? Your subjective injunctive norms, that's basically, and descriptive norms. These are basically social pressures. Do you feel social pressure to perform that behavior? And then perceived behavioral control. Is it a behavior that you feel like you can do? And so we asked people about all of these in our survey, and we took a modeling approach. For those who are big nerds, we can talk about it later, but we used a Bayesian generalized linear model with weakly informative normal priors. And all that means is it's basically very similar to a regression, but it's done in a way that makes me sound fancier when I try to publish my paper. I'm not going to go over what went into the dependent behavior or the dependent variables, but I included the questions here so that you can look at them when they send out the slides. But the prevention steps, that's what we're asking about. Do you intend to perform these prevention steps? If so, tell us about your attitudes, tell us about your norms, and tell us about your perceived behavioral control. And then we also wanted to know, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, we also added in two other things: risk perceptions related to aquatic invasive species and familiarity with aquatic invasive species. And so we asked about those as well because we thought those might also influence. So we added those to the theory of planned behavior as a framework. And so I'm just going to jump straight into the model results. And that's all I'm going to highlight here. There's other stuff we can talk about later, but we want to keep within time to make sure we have time for discussion. But first we need to talk for a second about the response distribution. So here, this is a chart. You can see by the state and the mode we had, and this is just an example. If you look at the percent male, the Qualtrics panels were around a third to a half, a little over a 0.5% male. And the list, the actual physical surveys were almost 90% male. Now, we were surveying boaters. We didn't have actual data on a state-by-state basis of what percent are male, but of people who boat. My guess is the answer is probably somewhere in between. So that's a caveat that, our response doesn't generalize perfectly to the broader population. However, when you look at what we're asking about, which is sort of these psychological connections that people are making, it's probably okay that we can't generalize exactly. The general themes that we're finding probably apply. So this is a dot plot with our results on them. I'm going to spend a minute on this. If I were even fancier, I would highlight stuff, but I'm not that fancy. So I'm just going to go down the left and the right. So on the left axis, we have the different constructs from the model, right? The different things that we asked about, the different independent variables. And then on the x-axis, so that was the y-axis, excuse me, going up and down. On the x-axis, we have the estimate of the regression coefficient, or how much does it matter. Things to the right of that dotted line are positive influences on the desire to perform or the intention to perform a behavior. Things to the left of that dotted line are negative influences on the intention to perform the behaviors. And that's after we try to control or adjust for all of the different variables. So the dots are the estimate, the bars are the 95% confidence interval. So that gives you an idea. When the confidence intervals are really narrow, that's a pretty good estimate. When they're really wide, there's more uncertainty around that. And to one more technical point is that when you see a little z on the y-axis, that means we measured a z-score. All that means is that for every standard deviation increase in, say, familiarity, you see about a 0.25, in this case, increase in the intention to perform the behavior score. But for most of you, if you just think of it as positive and negative influences, I think that'll get you there. So familiarity was by far, familiarity, this is with AIS related issues, is by far the biggest influence on intention to perform. People who are more familiar with AIS are much more likely to perform the behaviors. Attitudes toward the behaviors, that included things like, is this behavior likely to be effective? Is this behavior something that I can, mainly that. Is it likely to be effective? Those were also very strong in terms of their influence on intention to perform the behaviors. Perceived behavioral control is something along the lines of, is this something that I can do? Do I know how to perform the behaviors? Are the behaviors easy to perform or hard? And those were also positive influences. And so those things there, familiarity, attitudes, perceived behavioral control, and then maybe you even jump down one to norms, those are all positive influences. And those are all things that outreach can influence, can affect, right? Outreach builds familiarity. Outreach can build positive attitudes towards taking these behaviors. Outreach can help people feel like they can perform the behaviors. And outreach can also help to show people that there's normative, this is normatively important, or that lots of people are doing these things. And then other control variables like males are more likely than females. People from Ohio were least likely to perform the behavior. Why is that? I don't know. So thinking about that model, which I know I blazed through, we get back to that question of, does any of this work? And looking at that, I think the answer has to be yes, right? This is working. And you see the pathway between outreach, extension, between advertising maybe, and these behaviors. And so it is still hard to target individual behaviors because we just haven't done that research because it hasn't been funded. But overall, yes, this appears to be working. People who are more like, these are things that outreach is likely to influence and is likely to be making a difference. At least that's what our model shows. And so all of that is a fancy way of saying those of you who are working in extension, bravo. Those of you who are working in outreach, bravo. Those of you who fund extension and outreach, keep doing it. And those who fund social science, of course, keep doing that as well. Thank you. If you have questions, of course, send me an email.
Thank you so much, Stuart. I really enjoyed that, but you have made me sad for Ohio.
It's not me doing it. It's Ohio making Ohio sad for itself.
Thanks, I suppose. So
My wife is from Ohio. It's all good.
hold on a second. Have I reshared my screen? I can see my slides, but I can't see the Zoom menu.
No, I think I'm still spotlighted. Oh, so everybody's looking at me. Hello.
Hey.
There's my bike. Water bottle.
So let me bring up the slide. So there we are. You can find all of our speakers' contact information on this slide. I'm going to read through the questions that have been posted. Get your questions in quickly or upvote those that are interesting to you now because we have only 14 minutes to address them. So let's enter the Q&A session. And if we don't get to your question, once again, please do contact our speakers directly. And the first question from Nathan is targeted to Greg. So Nathan asks, what does cooperation between the regional panels look like with the Aquatic Nuisance Species Task Force when they might be dealing with different invasive species and different types of aquatic habitats?
That is an excellent question. We do focus on interregional panel coordination on a regular basis. The groups, the leadership, the coordinators and chairs from those groups meet generally in person once a year and talk about some of the priority and emerging issues in their respective regions and look for shared areas of interest where they can collaborate. I would say that more often than not, from those discussions, we find where 2 or 3 panels that are neighboring panels may share issues that they want to collaborate on. That's more common than having all of the panels working on the same issue, unless perhaps it relates to a pathway. Pathways are sometimes broad-reaching issues that we can collaborate on across the regional panels. I'll stop there.
I think that's an excellent point, Greg. That's something that immediately came to my mind when reading this question is that we're often dealing with human behaviors, those of vectors and pathways that are often united by the simple fact of being human and doing what people do.
Exactly.
So Kathleen asks, and I'm pretty sure that this is for Teresa, although it's not really a question, it's more of a commentary. So take it for what you will. Need a graphic artist to design better t-shirts or logo for Clean Drain Dry, or perhaps a design contest.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I will say we have at the commission a really great graphic artist. If you see like how all of our slides have these really cool logos, and if you are part of the Landing Blitz, we do now also have like an actually official logo, which crazy that since 2019 we didn't have one. It's 2024, we just got it for the first year, but it's a very good idea. The Clean Drain Dry, we always swag. You always need it every time you're doing an outreach event. It's so important.
Yeah, and it might be important to know too that the Stop Aquatic Hitchhikers campaign, of which Clean Drain Dry is a part, is a much bigger program than any of us, right? It's a national program.
Yeah.
Great. So I believe this is for Stuart. how did your behavior, and this is from Doug Jensen in Minnesota, whom I'm sure many of us know, right? How did your behavior results compare to surveys conducted previously in states, especially Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan, and Pennsylvania over the last 30 years across the Great Lakes?
Thank you for that question, Doug. And for those who don't know, Doug helped to design this survey, or he was part of the team that did this. And on top of that, most of the questions were ones that Doug had done. And to answer your question, Doug, I'm not ready to talk about that yet. How about that? Because I don't have authoritative answers for it. However, Tim is in the middle of writing a report, as am I, and so I don't have final info for that, but we'd be happy to get it to you as it's ready. I love a good punt.
Great.
Yeah.
Well punted, Stuart. So next is from Kathleen, and again, this is appropriate to Greg, and you might want to elaborate a little bit more than just the terms, perhaps even about the chronology of the application of these terms. But Kathleen is asking for the difference between ANS and AIS, right? Which of course is the difference between aquatic nuisance and aquatic invasive species. But again, feel free to offer us any insight you might have on that subject.
Okay. Probably not an expert on terminology, but from my experience over the years, I would say that aquatic nuisance species was the earlier terminology that was more common. That's why we see it in the legislation. But then as you focus on the issue, we're really focused on the non-native species, as I mentioned, non-indigenous, and that's also in the legislative title. So that for me, that's where the line gets drawn between ANS and AIS. So aquatic nuisance species could include native species as well as non-native species. So things like poison ivy that grows too thick in a patch is, a nuisance, as well as perhaps raccoons that are native and knocking over trash cans in the neighborhood. Whereas the aquatic invasive species, we're looking at those non-native species that are in new areas where they do not belong and are kind of aggressive in those environments where they can quickly reproduce, outcompete natives, those kinds of problems that are associated with the invasive terminology. And I'm happy for any of my colleagues to continue to elaborate.
Sounds like a good summary to me, right? And I think, yeah, it largely is related to the fact that the approach to the terminology has changed. And the early legislation talked about nuisance. The later legislation focused on the notion of non-native as being an important component.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see that change just in the legislation between 90 and 96. That's right.
Great, thank you. Kathleen Foley asks, and I'm guessing, again, this is probably best targeted to Teresa, is paddling through reeds ill-advised?
I guess it depends if the reeds are native or what else is growing in there. We obviously focus a lot when we do like the landing blitz, it's every type of watercraft. So that could be paddle boarders or kayakers, canoers, but mostly it's focused on motorized vessels because those have a large chance of having invasive species on them with like the motor and any type of like bilge or like onboard water. But I guess it depends. So some floating submerged species like European frogbit or something like that, definitely don't want to paddle through. You don't want to like be pushing it around the lake or getting it in your kayak and maybe, not dumping your kayak at the launch. But I think it's fine. I would paddle through those reeds if you know that it's you're in a good native area. You dump the water, at the lake you are. Definitely don't, leave water in your kayak and take it home. Try it. Totally fine.
Be vigilant about cleaning, draining, and
Yes.
drying, perhaps.
All three.
I'm all for that. Cool. So I'm not sure who this is targeted at, but I will read it and you can all feel free to reply. Kim Cheney asks, what is the mission statement of the organization? What are the top balance metrics being used to evaluate the return on investment of the time, effort, SNF dollars spent? So I'm not sure where to take this. Kim, if you've got something additional to tag onto that question, feel free. Any thoughts from our panel?
I wonder if this question was for was a little bit towards Stuart. Um and just
Maybe.
like I guess because you're looking at, does outreach really work? I think she's kind of wondering a little bit about that, maybe from a
Yeah, so
like
I don't,
marketing
I can't
standpoint.
speak like top down big picture on that stuff, right? In terms of the dollars or the effectiveness per dollar or something along those lines. What I can say is within like Sea Grant at Illinois Indiana Sea Grant, at all the Sea Grant programs, where I have visibility into that and across NOAA. Uh, they do a lot of evaluation work. All of our stuff is pretty extensively evaluated. It doesn't tend to be evaluated on a per dollar basis because I'm not sure, each individual program, I'm not sure that that is the right sort of framework to think through using that. The secret programs all get funding and then they get evaluated on a quadrennial basis. And so within Sea Grant, we let individual programs choose how to spend that money. And so I think that that would be a little bit tougher. In terms of on a very big scale, I think a lot of that work isn't done because people, spend the money on the programming and maybe do some evaluation, but collecting really good evaluation data is hard. Um, Something else Tim and I talk about, that's usually not over hot dogs, that's over beer. And but it's hard and it takes expertise and it takes time and it takes money. And I'm also an administrator and we always think I could use some more help, but every nickel I spend getting myself help is a nickel we don't spend on doing the work we're supposed to do, right? And so it's the same with funds. Every nickel you spend on evaluation is a nickel you aren't spending on another ad or whatever. And so it's very easy to say no to that piece because you want to be doing the work because most people in these positions are there to do the work. Now, I think we should be evaluating it. I think that that is penny wise and pound foolish, but that's, but I also recognize the reality of where we are.
Thank you, Stuart. Jit Weir asks, Teresa, has your program considered collaborating and advertising through popular angler smartphone apps like FishBrain?
That is one thing we've talked about and we have not done. We actually, this past like 2 years, one of the things we were going to try to do is gravitate towards like the influencer section of angling, which is really, really big. Um, and it is difficult. It is not really easy to have the money because it's not that cheap to kind of do these large scale advertisings. But yeah, we haven't looked at advertising actually like on an app, and that is something we should think about. Clearly, our digital marketing program is pretty new, so we every single year we're trying to get tips and tricks of how to expand it and get the most bang for our buck. So I like the idea. I think it's perfectly something we could definitely see ourselves doing the next few years.
Great. Thank you, Teresa. We only have a couple minutes left, so I want to remind our participants that if you have questions that have remained unanswered, please note the email addresses of our speakers and drop them a line directly. Becky Norris asked for Stuart, what are the units of your x-axis?
Sure. I'll show you that in just a second. I have one more thing thinking about it on return on investment because Kathleen Panel in the secret host and panelist, or Kathleen Foley, excuse me, in the secret host and panelist chat said it's difficult to measure the return on investment on environmental work. I think that's a really good point. And then one other thing is when you're talking about dollars, most of the dollars we spend include hidden externalities, hidden environmental externalities, right? And so it's not always apples to apples if you're only, because we're not fully accounting for the costs of things a lot of times. Anyway, so let me talk about my denominator, or not my denominators. Oh, someone else is sharing, so I can't show you my graph. But essentially what those are the regression coefficients. So when you do your model, you have a whole regression equation and it spits out the answers. And so basically those are the estimates for the regression coefficients. So you multiply Well, with the z-scores, what that means is for every standard deviation increase in the z-score, you would expect the behavioral intention index to increase by the amount by the amount of the estimate. So, for example, the coefficient with awareness was something like 0.25. So that means for every standard deviation or familiarity, excuse me, for every standard deviation increase in familiarity, you would expect the behavior index to go up by about 0.25. So that's what that means. Those are the regression coefficients.
So in very simple terms, we're discussing a strength of the relationship between the variable and its response.
Yes, thank you for that, Eugene. Yes.
My pleasure. This will probably be our last question. So Teresa Soodle asks, and I'm guessing this is also for Teresa, is it possible to have volunteers embedded in their respective communities to do some citizen science reporting and education that is not necessarily organized, that is specifically by the Blitz?
Yeah, I mean, so the regional like blitz that happens is always open for anyone to participate if they want. Mostly it is kind of covered on like a state, DNR level just because they have the capacity to do it. But volunteers help all the time. So if it was something you're interested in, we post the like weeks of our dates beforehand. Probably about 3 months before. And so, you can always go to your local boat launch. We have resources on our webpage that are like printable. And if you like have a group like a lake association that like wants to get involved during those weeks, it's open to anybody who wants to be involved. It's definitely, you don't have to be an organization or like with the DNR. I would, encourage it. And the reporting metrics, that is just for our statewide agency. So you wouldn't have to report to us, which is nice. You just get to do the volunteer work without having to send me data in October.
Right. I want to thank again all of today's speakers. They were excellent. I really enjoyed this interaction. I really enjoyed all of the presentations. If you did, I encourage you to look into the additional programming of the North Central Region Water Network. You can find us at northcentralwater.org. We do lots of programming. I'd love to have you along on all of it. So do check us out. Anne, is there anything I've missed? Are we a wrap?
I don't think so. I think we're a wrap. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time.
Thank
Thank you and
you.
farewell.